Hi everyone, my name is Mikhail Rodin and this is Прошлое channel and the frontiers of historical research. And today we will talk about dark matter of the Bronze Age.
The dark matter of history. This is what we call those societies that previously were not present on our land charts. Yet, they had the strongest influence on the civilizations known to us. We now realize that not only resources for Mesopotamia, Egypt, and other states of Bronze Age were supplied by those peoples. Many technologies that changed the world were also generated there, on the periphery. Ivan Semyan is not only an archaeologist, he is also an experimentalist. He's involved in the excavations of the Sintashta culture, and together with his team, he constructed several copies of Bronze Age chariots. Their experiment proved they were an effective means of transportation in battle throughout the steppe. In understanding of the Bronze Age world as a whole, what has the discovery and exploration of the Sintashta culture given us?
For many decades in Bronze Age archaeology was understanding that in Kazakhstan and Ural steppes was inhabited semi-nomadic tribes which create little settlements, which include a small number of long houses, grazed cattle, and that these people did not create the big population concentration. But in 1972, Soviet archaeologists Gennady Zdanovich and Vladimir Genin found a unique burial barrow on a small river in the steppes, Sintashta, and they found very unique materials, very rich materials, include the bronze weaponry, the chariot, remains of the chariots, the chariot harness, chariot horses, the status items. Nearby the burial ground, they find large fortified settlement called also Sintashta. And in the next few decades, Professor Zdanovich and other scientists find more than 20 settlements, fortified settlements, and they discover the new world, the new center of indo-European history. Sintashta people create the new cultural stereotypes, which the descendants, the Andronova culture, was spreading on the very big territories to the Siberia, to the Central Asia, and create the new big part of Indo-European world.
When did the first chariot originate? What were the advantages of its design? How did it spread across the world?
Modern archaeological research constantly received the new evidences of connection between this steppe world and the main economy centers of the Bronze Age. For example, in the excavation in Southern Urals, archaeologists was find the piece of cotton, the cotton textile. And also we must say about the very important technological innovations like a chariot complex, because the earliest archaeologically known chariot complex appeared in the Sintashta culture. But not only the chariots itself, but also special chariot harness, the shield-type cheek pieces. According the most part of researchers, the Sintashta people and Andronova people belong to the indo-iranian part of the indo-European languages. And some researchers think that Sintashta people and Andronova people are ancestors of Mitanni Aryans, for example, the people from northern Mesopotamia. the famous known historically charioteers, Aryan charioteers of Bronze Age. And this connection was between the Central Asia and northern Mesopotamia, and probably when these people going through the Central Asia, they forgot their cultural shape. They control their cultural view in material culture, but they save their identity and their language, which is important. Genetic research also show us the big influence of these people on the long distance. For example, in the genetic of Brahmin caste in India, we can see the well-documented traces of steppe genetic. And we can say for sure that Sintashta people create the very important center of eastern part of Indo-European world. The first Sintashta type chariots was found in early 70s. And important to say that it is not only the remains of the chariot itself, it is a harness, chariot harness, the cheek pieces. It is a chariot, special chariot horses. It is a special charioteer weaponry, and the most important, it is earliest known spoked wheels, like on this photo. The cheek pieces of this shield type was well known in the Mycenaean world. And researchers suggested that it can be something like step imitation of the aristocratic culture of the economy centers of Bronze Age. Sintashta was dated a little later than the Mycenaean tombs, after the 17th centuries BC. But in 1995, Professor Vinogradov and Professor Anthony made a radiocarbon analysis and had a date 21st century BC, which much more early. So, and now in Sintashta theme, we have the hundreds of dates, radiocarbon dates, and we know that Sintashta exists near 1 century, somewhere between the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC. That means that the Sintashta chariot is the earliest known, archaeologically known chariot complex. And the big discussion, the very hot discussion through the few decades was about the significance of these chariots. Is it a ritual chariot, or it is a status chariot? Or it is a really war chariot? And many archaeologists, like Professor Andrei Epimachov, proved that it is a real war chariot. And in 2021, we, with my colleague Igor Chechishkov, we decided to conduct the experiment to create the authentic reconstruction of Sintashta chariot complex. We use only the authentic materials, the sinews, the natural glue, the wood, the tendons, horn for the harness, for the cheek pieces. We trained half in a year 2 real chariot horses, and we have a lot of material, a lot of data. We create a lot of data which show that all of these very technological decisions, like a spoked wheel without any metal detail, or this very effective harness with the cheek pieces with the spikes, make sense only for the warfare, or maybe for the some kind of competition for challenging. According to the well-known typology and chronology of shield-type cheek pieces, now we can say that the way of distribution of this technology going through the Kazakhstan and Ural steppes to the Volga region and then to the Pontic region, to the Black Sea steppes and to the Balkans and to the Greece. And very interesting that it is not only the distribution of the principle of the functioning, but even the ornament.
How did the people of the Southern Urals contribute to the development of metal production technologies? What kind of role did they play in the Eurasian resource market?
Copper and tin were the oil of Bronze Age world. And the Urals is a very rich region in copper ore. It is oxidized ores, malachite and azurite. And Kazakhstan also is very rich by the tin ore. And the first Indo-European people and people who first mine these ores was the Yamnaya culture people. It was in the middle of the 3rd millennia BC. And we don't know exactly why they going away. Maybe because of they come from the much more warm territory and they not survive in this harsh climate of the steppes, which can be minus 40 degrees. But they explore these mines, and the Sintashta people was their descendants in this moment. Sintashta people comes to the Urals in 4 or 5 centuries, half a millennia after the Yamnaya people. And their mining activity was not so high as Yamnaya times, but Sintashta people for sure satisfied their own needs in metal. They had a lot of metal, but only their descendants, their Andronova culture, really included in this world market of the metal in the Bronze Age. For example, in a famous Solubaran ship, which was sank in 15th century BC, archaeologists found a lot of metal raw material, include near 10 tons of copper and near 1 ton of tin. And isotope analysis of the lead and tin shows that approximately 30% of this tin was mined somewhere in the Central Asia and even in the eastern Kazakhstan. It will show us how the products come from mines to the world markets. And in the ships, archaeologists find even the step tools, the knives, the chisels and daggers.
What were the settlements of Sintashta like? And what kind of economy did the people have?
Sintashta culture has created a unique type of fortified settlements. The settlement, the main marker of the architecture of those settlement is that every long house adjoined each other by the side wall and adjoined the fortification wall but by the end wall of the building. And we can say that all of this structure is like one big building with separate rooms. The various forms of planning in settlements are very different. It can be the circle, the oval, the rectangular, and every settlement have absolutely same buildings. We don't have any evidence of hierarchy of buildings. We see that all dwellings, they're absolutely same. The settlement was built from wood and clay, and around the defensive walls they dug the ditch, defensive ditch. According to various estimates, the population of people can be from a few hundreds to until the 2,000 of people, and the most part of people, the biggest numbers of inhabitants was there in the winter time to protect from the cold. Interesting moment that every dwelling has own big well, which could provide the water to the cattle, because cattle in the winter also live inside the dwellings. And the important moment that the little rivers in the steppe frozen until the bottom, and you can't take the water from this river, and the well is your only source of water. Interesting that every living space in the houses has their own furnaces for metallurgy and metal casting, and archaeologists even find the metal splashes inside the houses. In addition to protect from enemies and wild animals, the important function of the fortification was the insulate this settlement, because adjoined walls of the defensive walls and the dwelling walls is very well safe the warm inside. Sintashta people didn't know any agriculture. Their most important resource was the cattle, and they was engaged in a unique economy model, the sedentary pastoralism, and they grazed the cattle in the vicinity of the settlement.
How did the Sintashta culture emerge and disintegrate?
We know that Sintashta people was immigrants, and researchers consider different cultures as the ancestors of Sintashta culture. For example, the Bashva culture from Eastern Europe, or the catacomb culture from the Black Sea steppes. And anyway, genetics show us big similarity between the corded ware cultures of the Europe and the Sintashta culture. And this shows us that the Sintashta people comes from the West. There are different appearances about the Sintashta migration in the science. For example, the military conflicts, or the development of copper of Southern Urals, or the rich pastures of Urals. But we know that these people come from more warm territory, and they create the unique model of surviving. They create the settled pastoralism system based on these big fortified settlements with the very, very big concentration of people, of population, and especially in the winter. They can graze them cattle only in the vicinity of the settlement, and it was the limiting factor. And cattle was the main resource of these people. They very feared to lose the cattle, and they create the special items to protect the cattle, the special weaponry, the chariot complex to protect the cattle, the special composite bows, the war axes, the very early bronze arrowheads, etc. Big concentration of people for a century create a very serious overgrazing and a big stress of the vegetation system and steppe. People widely spread across the steppe start to live in small groups and become much more nomadic. Descendants of Sintashta people, become the professionals of surviving in the steppes and even in prosperity in the steppes. And they made a big influence in all Bronze Age history.